And the whole idea is people with type 4D hair, that's the hair that locks, which is called Dada. So they're calling the Dada as a child that is born with a crime. Not a crime, seen as a crime now, but born with a crown. We'll get to the crime side, but at exception, it was seen as a child born with a crown, right? Fragility in the sense that cutting the hair required rituals, right? And in some culture, if you just go and boom, 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 cut it off, bad things happen, right? And again, we will get to where all this come from biblically, right? Like the divine origin, the fragility and the practices, and the royal naming, right? The Dada, and then the Dada for the Yoruba community and the Ezenwa for the Igbo community, right? So across civilization, where hair grew freely, Loc appeared. And with them, a sacred group was created, right? In the Bible, they were set apart as the Levites, right? But it wasn't the hair that made the Levites to be chosen as the priest, right? It was like, Moses was angry because of the calf, and then Moses shouted, "Who will stand with the Lord?" And then the Levites, they showed up and they showed out. And then they were chosen to be the priest because they stood with Moses. That's the story, right? But this has nothing to do with the hairstyle. Just trying to make you guys know how the Levites were chosen, right? Also, even down in ancient Egypt, right? A lot of pharaohs, right? They've opened some tombs and they've seen them with locks, right? It was a thing. When you look at the statues, you see it. So from a sacred crown to a colonial weapon to a cultural crime to a protected group of people, the hair of locks have really evolved over time, right? First of all, just trying to even know what locks is and how it's maintained and how it's grown, that takes a while. But now this is where we're going to go. We're going to go to sacred, we're going to go to colonial times, then we're going to go to the era where they were seen as a crime. Still seen as a crime in Nigeria. Like, come on, guys. How do you stop people down the street just because they have locks? I know I just spoke about the whole NEPA issue and talking about civil duties and this also falls under that, right? You can't just arrest people because they have a certain type of hairstyle. But let's focus. So between 3400 BC and the 1400s, locks marked kingship, marked priest, and they were marked as divine children across Africa, Asia, and the Americans, right? So during some period, if you were a child and you came out with locks, you had it good. And between the 15th and the 16th century, right, during the height of slavery, people that grew locks were targeted because the colonial people saw them as, okay, these were leaders or they were seen as priests, and they humiliated them by cutting off the locks in public. See where does your fancy hair will be, right? So you can imagine how glorious and beautiful that locks would be if that child kept the locks from childhood and the person was like in their 30s or even in their 20s. Just so they chopped it up to humiliate them. And then, okay, shout out to the Rastafarians, right? Had a slip of tongue earlier on. The Rastafarians, by keeping the Nazarene vow, they kept their locks. And they were seen as a symbol of African identity and defiance of the colonial masters back when they had already moved to the plantation where they were working on. And today, keeping of locks is still contested. It is still a contested practice, right? In the workplace, people are rejected because they have locks. In school policies, right? Some institutions will not accept your child to come in with locks. They're like, no, usually for the boys, right? For the girls, I don't think they have that issue that much. Because if you're keeping sister locks, which is the smallest type of locks, you might not even know the person has locks. But for the guys, it's very, very noticeable. If you're a guy and every other guy cuts their hair and you're the only one on campus with hair, you're gonna be spotted out. You're gonna be like, hey, why does that guy have to have hair and the rest of us don't? Right? So it becomes a thing. So the basic saying is, right, why they call them the child king is like they believe that the heavens, the gods, braided their hair before they came in, right? That's why they call the hair a crown. So if the gods braided your hair, who are we humans to cut the hair? Right? That's how the whole Dada and sacred, the arc of the sacred hair was introduced. So the question is, if the hair was sacred enough to come from heaven as braided, how did it become dangerous enough to get people killed? From a divine crown to a criminal status. How did this happen? How did this come to be?